And I think the average for the first, first 2 or 3 tests, the mid-semester and the first quizzes was something like 2 or 3 out of however many. So it didn't cross the single digits, and that was the average class total. So it was a pretty tough class, and of course, those of us who took it, we remember it in a number of ways. I personally got into the field of communications, and it took me a while for a lot of those concepts to settle. Those are pretty difficult concepts to teach at undergraduate level, and I really appreciate Professor Rao's the way he taught the class and how he was able to drive difficult concepts through. Maybe we can have Dr. Rao speak to us a bit about his memories of our batch and of the class. Professor Rao, would you like to say a few words? Professor Rao, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, great hearing you people. It's nice to know that you're all faring very well in life, and I hope I haven't disappointed you too much. I sent a message. There is a book on digital communications by 2 Italians, Benedetto and Biglieri, who in their preface say, it is stated in Mahabharata that what is contained in this book you can find elsewhere, but what is not in this book we can't find anywhere. I think in some sense aspired for such a goal. And what made it a reality is our view. So, and as far as the stuff that you just mentioned, there are many of my colleagues who have bleeding hearts. So they are always very generous with giving whatever they wish to give. And I thought there must be some conservation principle which kind of corrects the distortion. That's how I used to treat in terms of how I evaluated whatever needs to be evaluated. I hope you enjoyed whatever I thought and it is useful to you. That's about all I wish to say.
Thank you. One of the things I remember, going back to Professor Gupta, Vijay Gupta, one of the things I remember about the STAR problems was you were supposed to submit the solution at a certain time on a particular day. And so in my case, I submitted a solution in the morning, and then throughout the day I thought about it and I thought I had a better solution, so I submitted a second solution to it. And the result was your second solution was worse than your first. That was the comment I got. So I would like Professor Gupta to maybe come up and say a few words. Maybe give us a STAR problem or something.
Good evening, everyone. It is indeed the greatest pleasure of mine to be here last 2 days. I didn't know that the STAR problems was such a famous thing, or something that stuck with you for 25 years. You were probably the only batch in the IIT that I tried this with. I had a lot of pleasure doing this, but it was too much work for me, so I didn't try it any other semester. But those were the days when teaching was a real pleasure. You responded. You didn't let a single mistake that I made go unchallenged. There were at times I introduced deliberate mistakes, and he caught them all. I must have caused a lot of heartburn in a large number of you. Can I apologize 27 years later? But I hope that he still remembers it is enough proof for me that it worked. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Gupta. So we have also Professor Santosh Gupta from Chemical Engineering Department, and one of our batchmates, Rahul Bindlish, sent a nice tribute to him, and I thought I would read it out. And we have Professor Santosh Gupta here as well. So, Professor Gupta is an authority in polymer reaction engineering. He is recognized by both academia and industry, and Rahul writes that he was fortunate to interact with him socially while he was a visiting professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And he benefited greatly from Professor Gupta's guidance and friendship. Apparently Professor Gupta has a keen interest in poetry as well. So those are thoughts of one of our batchmates to Professor Gupta. We have Professor Sarma who taught us ESC 206, one of our core courses, one of the first electronics courses that most of us took, and of course the entire batch took ESC 206 as well, and a lot of us have very good memories of this class. One of the things, the class itself was fairly broad brush, covering everything from op-amps to digital design, Carnot maps, and everything else. And it was quite a bit of a broad topic, broad set of topics to cover in one semester. And Professor Sarma did an excellent job, as I recall, being able to convey each topic to the right level of detail that is needed to understand it. And so some of the approaches that he used was sort of a black box approach. So if you have an op-amp, you treat it as a black box and look at its properties. And some of us who were more interested in what was inside the box, we would go up to Professor Sarma and ask him, okay, what goes inside it? So you say, are you from Jubilee? We would say, okay, yes, we are. Then he said, you have one whole semester to learn about what's inside the box. It is enough for you to know the properties of it in this class. So that was a great way of actually abstracting things out and being able to teach something that is so broad in an undergraduate class in one semester. And so Professor Sarma had a great knack for doing that, and that still remains in mind. And Professor Sarma is very active in industry, and he's involved with Samtel, and even now he's fairly active both in academics and the industry. So would you like to say a few words, Professor Sarma?
I can only say thank you very much to have invited me here and to be with me. I would just like to change the methodology. I want to ask you a question. Do you know what is the logo of IIT Kanpur?
What is your name?
Lotus. How many of you know what is the logo of IIT? No.
The eyes.
It is Trishul of Seva. It is Trishul of Seva. Do you know how we got that logo? The first chairman board of governors of this institute was Professor Sampurna. And he was a Sanskrit scholar, Dr. Sampurna. And Professor Kelkar wanted a logo for IIT Kanpur. We sent Mr. E.K. Das, none of you will know him, to Lucknow to talk to him to find out what logos would be used. And he said, yes, Trishula Shiva. And you know what did the Trishula Shiva stands for? There are three arms to the Trishul, and each one has an eye on it. And the first one stands for Ichcha. You must have a wish. The second one stands for Kriya. You must satisfy the wish by action. And the third one stands for Jnana. You must use the knowledge to do this. So this is the emblem with which this institute has started. And all of you have proved yourself so that you have satisfied the three things that are there in the emblem, and you have become leaders in the profession you are in. And we as teachers are very proud of you, and I hope we continue to bring more and more laurels to this institute. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that piece of history. That's very insightful. Thanks for that. Next, let me talk about Professor Biswas, who taught 3 classes in the electrical engineering department, and he was also the BTech project guide for many of us. And I always remember Professor Biswas as somebody very energetic, running from one appointment to the other. In fact, some of the mid-semester exam papers that we would get would be worn because we would have just photocopied them and touched them to class. So very energetic and very inspiring and very clear thinking. So a lot of us remember his classes very fondly. Professor, now we are appreciative of your. Okay.
See, thanks for lighting it up. I'm smoking it out.
One humorous thing that Nitin pointed out about Professor Biswas, apparently we were talking about Chebyshev filter, and so he was asked, Nitin was asked by Professor Biswas, so what does the shape of a Chebyshev filter look like? And Nitin said, it goes up and then it goes down later. And Professor Biswas said, well, whatever goes up must come down. So that was his way of saying that we need to be more precise in what we say. I'll call Dr. Biswas up on stage and have him say a few words.
Well, thank you very much for asking us to come here and share whatever thoughts you have. Now, Priyakara is also on the web, and he's walking away. I hope he realizes he's on candid camera. But talking about him, it's interesting that there are some of us in electrical engineering department at the same time. We're all equally foolish and all equally adventurous. I am the one who has always been labelled as coming to the class, like maybe with an unfinished question, as Sridhar was mentioning. And it actually happened once that when I was getting cyclostyle, those days there was no photocopies, it was cyclostyle machines. And the cyclostyle paper tore, and we had just 5 minutes for the examination. So I ran and finally got it done. But talking about what we enjoyed, and that is where we are thankful to you, the students. See, you allowed us to experiment, and since retiring from IIT Kanpur, I have taught in many places. But I must say, I do not think I ever got the kind of pleasure that I could get here, because the simple reason that we got a response, maybe not from the whole class ever, but from a significant part of the class in whatever deviations we tried. And that is important, that makes life interesting. Because, as you know, variety is the spice of life. So if we teach the same code the same way every year, we are bound to get thoroughly bored, and we'll pass on the boredom to you. So that is why we kept on experimenting, trying different things. I do not remember ever repeating the same material twice in my life. And so, I'm thankful to all of you that you kept up the spirit in spite of that. You accepted those variations. You are the guinea pigs of many of these experiments. In fact, P.R.K. Rao and V.P. Sinha used to say sometimes, I wonder why the government pays us at all. Because we do what we wanted to do, we enjoy doing, and we keep doing it, and they never interfere, they never tell us what to do, and yet they pay us. And we really felt it, that there's nothing else we'll be able to do anyway. And that is where and that is where we must thank the student community, the IIT students who allowed us to do this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor Biswas. Nice. Then next I'll ask Rohit to talk about a couple of professors that he wrote about and he wanted to talk about. So.
I just want, can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay. I just want to talk about two professors. And first, we should all thank Sriram for doing this. The first one, at IIT, we learn a lot of things in classroom, but I think for many of us who are here, we also learn things outside classroom. And in many ways, some of those experiences also shaped us. And as a representative of faculty who got involved in shaping our lives outside classroom, one of them was Professor Vagnare. I'm sure all the inter-IIT sports team people remember him very fondly. As a whole class, we never took any physics class from Professor Vagnare, but we got a lot of classes in the cricket field because he was an awesome cricket player. And because he was connected with the cricket team so much, during our final year, we asked him to be the faculty counselor for the sports council. And just want to share one memory that year. I think Professor Vagnare, before the inter-IIT meet, he was in practice session for every single team, perhaps multiple times. So I don't know who was the dean at the time because Professor Vagnare did no academic work that year. He was with all of us in the field. So I think for those type of life lessons, I think I'd like to recognize Professor Vagnare and all of you who have been involved as a warden, as various committee chairs and so on. Right? The other professor I want to talk about was I will give example as Professor P.C. Kapoor. He was my BTech project advisor. And all of us, again, in addition to classroom, our experiences got shaped for many of us through our BTech project. In my case, some of my classmates may remember I did not have a 10.2 GPA. Actually, my GPA was much, much lower than that. some of you know that, keep it secret. But in my 4th year, I thought, okay, I should do at least one thing right in academia. And Professor P.C. Kapoor had the reputation of failing people if they did not do well. And he had a big beard and he looked like the doc in Back to the Future movie. So he didn't have the most pleasant personality or the way he interacted with everybody, but he was also known to do some really high quality research. So I went and asked him if I can do BTech project with him, and he said, well, you haven't done anything in class 3 years anyway, why do you want to do this? Just do a simple project and you'll get the degree anyway, and you can find a job or do something else. And once I said I really want to do this one project, he gave a challenging problem, which I worked on. Eventually that paper got accepted. But before the project got over, he called and said, why don't you consider a career in academia? I said, I don't think anybody is ever going to give me any admission into any higher education place simply because my grades are not high enough. And his response was, well, why don't you bring me a piece of paper and let me write you a recommendation letter. So he handwrote a recommendation letter which I mailed to 5 universities, and I got 3 scholarships with full funding without taking a GRE or TOEFL. So sorry friends who had to work hard to do all that, I just had to do the BTech project. I reconnected with Professor P.C. Kapoor last week. He is about 80 years old now, and he has lost part of his memory. He comes and goes. So I had to remind him about a lot of our individual interactions and about several of you. But once I started talking about it, he did remember a lot, and he wishes all of us well. And I also wanted to point out that he just received the Lifetime Achievement Award from one of the largest metallurgical and minerals engineering society in the world. So, thank you.
Thanks, Rohit. Rohit, by the way, is a professor at Cornell, and so the tradition of professors and next generation of professors continues. So he's one of the faculty members in our batch. Thanks, Rohit. So we also had a great set of physics teachers, and from our core physics curriculum to later on to the integrated MSc physics batches, we had a very influential set of teachers teaching physics 01, 02, modern physics, and other quantum physics in the core courses and then onwards. So I wanted to ask Alpan Rawal, one of the physics, MSc physics students, batchmates, to say a few words. Who is in room 137?
who many of us know as a very enthusiastic, very lively individual. I don't think he taught us any lecture classes, but he was involved in a number of tutorials, and many of us knew him at a personal level as well. So he had great sincerity and great enthusiasm for the subject, and in communicating the subject to the students. He was, I think he was he was a tutor for section B4 or B5, and B4, right. And a lot of people used to be very envious of that section because Professor Banerjee was the tutor. And he was not only passionate about teaching, he was also very passionate about cricket, just like Professor Waganai. So I don't know what it is about physics and cricket, but he was extremely passionate, and he was a spin bowler. And he taught us many things about life and physics on the cricket field. There were some things about him that still remain mysterious today. So he was often called an MIT grad, even though He went to Oxford, and he was so passionate about his teaching that even after he retired from IITK, he started teaching maths and physics to biology PhDs at NCBS in Bangalore. And I met him in Bangalore a couple of years ago. And one of the things he told me was that those students don't even compare to first year undergrads at IITK. So he was comparing PhD students in biology at NCBS to first year undergrads at IITK. And he was very disappointed with them as compared to us. So he inspired us in many different ways. He was a phenomenal teacher. And he loved life, cricket, the universe, everything in between. The other person I want to talk about, who is no more with us, is Professor Parasnis, A.S. Parasnis. May his soul rest in peace. He was an extremely model individual. He tried to create model individuals out of us as well, unfortunately unsuccessfully, but he tried his very best. And there are a number of things that we remember about him. One of the things that Pratik Pant and I remembered was that he would give us these Polaroid sheets to take with us on walks around the campus, so that we could measure polarization as a function of reflected angle and so on when we took walks at night after getting a little bit drunk, of course. So he taught us lots of different things, like the distinction between physical optics and optical physics, the correct way to eat mangoes. He always said you shouldn't eat mangoes at the kitchen table, but you should eat them over the kitchen sink, so that if things get dirty, it's all going to fall in. We remember an incident where me and maybe a couple of other people, we were roller skating in the academic area along the corridors, and he taught us, he confiscated our roller skates. He wrote a letter to our parents saying that we were gliding along the corridors of the academic area, and when he got an acknowledgement, that was when he returned our roller skates. So he was very disciplined about things. He had a very strong sense of right and wrong. And we learned a lot of things from him. So we remember many of his admonishments. We remember how he used to tell us that you should always wear shoes to class because you're the cream of the country. And if you don't have shoes, I'll give you shoes. He was very intolerant of mediocrity. He was very emphatic about punctuality. He always wore bespoke suits that fit him to a T. He was an incredible person. And he just loved optics, and he loved reveling in, that fascination with optics in the company of his students. So I think, okay. So the other individual, I guess many of us remember, is Professor Deshpande, who also passed away. When we met him last, he was not at his peak. A stroke had struck him. I think many of us met him. He could write with great difficulty in a notebook. He couldn't really write on the blackboard. So for each class that he conducted in quantum physics, he wrote down in his notebook the day before exactly what he would write in the blackboard. And it was very slow, tedious, laborious work, requiring a lot of effort. And then one person would have the honor of taking that notebook and copying it on the blackboard, since he couldn't write in the blackboard. But he was an incredible person. One of the things I, as a physicist, know about his work is he was one of the first people to suggest theory of tachyons, which are particles that travel faster than light, which are actually completely consistent with Einstein's theory of relativity. Even Einstein didn't realize that his own theory was consistent with particles that travel faster than light. And in fact, Deshpande was one of the people who proved that particles traveling faster than light is consistent with Einstein's theory. Unfortunately, those particles were never discovered. They still haven't been discovered. But if they were, he might well have gotten the Nobel Prize. So, and he was an extremely kind individual, and we will greatly miss him. He had great dedication, courage, and foresight.
Next, I wanted to say a few words about Professor Dande again. Great administrator, and of course during our times he was not the director, but since then after we left, he did a number of things to improve the campus. A lot of the things we see around the campus are due to his efforts, so there are a number of improvements that have been done, both from the academic resources point of view, as well as beautifying the campus. And so we really thank Professor Dande for all those efforts. And I would like him to come up and say a few words.
If you ask us to speak, we don't speak less than 55 minutes. So I will just cut it by many, many factors. There is one thing I wanted to mention, that there is something unique about your batch which nobody mentioned in the last 2 days. And this I am speaking as the resident of IIT Kanpur. We all lived here for 30, 40 years, and there was always amongst us as parents something to look forward to in terms of the kids growing on the campus. This is the batch which has sent the maximum number of kids from the campus to IIT. I have noticed, but we are very proud, and all of them, everybody remembers, knows, is in touch, and that is something which I consider very important. The second thing I want to mention is that at least few times in my life, I have felt extremely happy when somebody who is an alumnus comes to you and tells you, which is something very, very important for a teacher. I was teaching once a course on kinematics, and I taught it in different fashion. And there was a student in that class. This was like a senior course. He went and he joined a company in Hyderabad, and after 1 year he came and he said, "Sir, that in my job I used your notes of the class." I thought this is something I've never heard of, that the notes of the course are being used. He said that I took those notes, and he was in a software company trying to code the kinematics equations, and he found out that whatever is the approach of matrices, that was very useful to him in terms of coding. I felt, boy, I thought we only teach irrelevant things. I mean, so relevant that we code it. So also I had a very similar experience. A colleague of yours came to me 2 days back, and he told me, "You know what?" And I said, "What?" He said that you were doing this CAD work and you had this lab, and we came, and then there was this summer course of the summer project which you offered, and I was instrumental in getting the summer project, and apparently he went abroad and got a job in IBM based on that experience. So I'm sure somebody is sitting over here, or maybe he's outside, but something, okay, so he knows it better than me, and he can tell you about it, but this is something which is really a biggest reward for a teacher, that you have really influenced in a manner by which it really changes the life of a student actually. Well, in any case, the student-teacher relationship is so wonderful, so nice, that any time when it gets rekindled, it is always a joy and a pleasure to interact with you. We would like to thank both Mrs. Dhande and myself. We would like to thank, क्या कहते हैं, तहे दिल से आपका शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ. And we hope you will invite us when you will celebrate your golden jubilee also. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Dande, that was nice. So then I have the other professor that's also visiting us in this during these few days, Professor Srivatsan, who was an electrical engineering professor, great circuits teacher. He taught us a circuit design course, and also he was a BTech project of a number of us, BTech project guide for a number of us, as well as a PhD guide for a couple of us at least. And Professor Srivatsan also had a lot of influence in the ERNet project and bringing the internet to IIT and to some parts of India. And so I would like to thank Professor Srivatsan and invite him over to say a few words.
Good evening, and my heartfelt thanks to the batch for inviting us and giving us such a joyous moment of recollection and hope, and also much hope for the future, seeing your lead and sort of setting an example for other younger batches to come. There's a saying in Gita which says, Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasa jnanat dhyanam visishyate jnanat karma palatyagaha yagaha shantihi anantara. What it means is that better than mere rote learning, Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasa, mere not beyond the abhyas, this is a rote learning kind of thing. Better to understand the import of what you have learned and the implications of what you learned, and that is the dhyana on that learning that you are doing. And having understood the import and the implications, if you think an action has to be taken, you better act. Never refuse to act. Do not postpone that action. So he says, based on that implication and import, if you act, that is the second one. Dhyanat karma palatyaga. Palatyaga, I always interpreted palatyaga as not sacrificing fruits of action, without worrying about the consequences of that, what could be the result. Since you have already thought all the important implications, to the best of your knowledge, better go and take the risk and plunge. That's self-prevention in some sense. If you do that, then everybody benefits. So tyagaha shanti anantara. It is that kind of daringness which is kind of, I feel, is a sacrifice. And I know I have seen quite a few of you in the batch taking such plunges without knowing what the future could be. Daring. I even found some of you have even quit your jobs and started and cozy jobs and daring to make your own life. It is that daring that really I appreciate some of you, and I hope that sets an example. All of us need to show such daring if we have to really progress in the future. Some of the experiences I had, one of the key things I was doing was more in the background of all of you, that is the lab courses. AC 206 front end was always Professor K. R. Sharma or somebody. Sometime, of course, I also took it. In the back end, it is Professor Biswas or myself. And you do not know how much things we have to do in the background. What you are seeing really is what the visible part of the iceberg. The bottom part of the iceberg is where I have been involved, and thanks to the tremendous support the entire faculty, the department gave. And amount of travel, we had to get op-amps for the following week's experiment, and Professor Biswas almost will stash 20,000 rupees cash in his pocket and say, let us go to the Chandni Chowk and get it. Something like that. And you know, traveling with him is a big thing, because he will leave at 4 o'clock for catching 4:30 train, and you know anything can happen on the road to delay you, to prevent that train. Somehow luck was always braving the brave of this thing. And he went, and remember, 20,000 rupees those days maybe some had more than 1,00,000 rupees today in the pocket. It's something you can, and we will finish buying, whether it is a breadboard, this or that, and we had the great Bhatnagar and other staff to support us. It was a continuous challenge to keep the labs running. Maybe that was why when I got admitted in, I do not know how many of you know how I joined the faculty. I was not really planning to join or something. I just wrote a letter when I was in Queen's University, finishing PhD, to Professor Satish Malik. Unfortunately, he is no more. I will pray that he is doing. I was there with the last minute, almost with him. And so when I was writing a letter to him that I am completing my PhD, I am wondering what to do. That's all. It was aerogram days. Forget about modern days. And what I get is a letter from Professor Sharan, who was head of the department, come and join the faculty. That's all I had. No CV, nothing was asked. Whether I had published anything, nothing was asked. Because my previous track record of 5 years was full of lab building. I realized that, and that was getting appreciated. So when I came here, you know what happened was, all three people were involved, and all of them were my teachers, Professor Sharma, Professor Biswas, and you know, on Professor Sharan. First thing I learned on a Sunday, I think it was December 10th, 1981 or something, here. In fact, first I land in Delhi. My brother says there's a call from Kanpur, please go there. There is a faculty hunting and exercise like they were doing. So when I land here, on a Sunday I walk into the SS building. Professor P.R. Rao was doing with his books. As soon as he saw me, he almost jumped out of the seat. Hey, come sit here, come here. And then as soon as I said, I'll bring KRS here. That is our Professor K.R. the historian and many things for us. Okay? And when K.R. Sharma comes, he looks at me like this, seriously. He says, don't talk to this fellow, hold him. So K.R. Sharma held me this hand, K.R. Rao held me this hand. Then he says, you are under arrest. And they both escort me, let's go to the IG of police. That is the head of the department. Professor Sharan was sitting there, and he's saying, now you can see that. And I was also a student here, don't forget that. I'm an alumnus of this place. So I have multiple colors here. And I was a research engineer. I worked on all aspects of IT, like up to the administrative duties of the head of the department. So when I go there to the IG of police, that is Professor Sharan was sitting there, he was almost jumped with the thrill that I have come. He said, no, then immediately K.R. said, don't talk to this fellow, get the warrant. Then the joining letter. And then K.R. Sharma says, sign here, you will feel the rest. That is how I joined your faculty. So even that is, no, anyone with that kind of a teacher, you do not know how we were groomed as teachers, because I have the great experience of being groomed by my own teachers as a teacher while I was a teacher. You know, that experience is also phenomenal. He will teach you 6, some years later, I teach, and then he will sometimes come to the class or go through that, and then he will go for the chai after the class. She was teaching like this. You know, there is another way of teaching like this. I ended up, and R&B will say there is no such thing as feedback amplifier. He will fight with me. And then I ended up teaching, understanding teaching how to teach feedback amplifier in 4 different ways. You know, that is the kind of thrill on the corridors of ACES and E department were really the classrooms for me. And the discussions and the chai meetings and all that. Thanks for such a great institution and such great risk takers and other living examples. And I believe that we must continue. I have not quit any of my teaching or building or engineering things. I am engineering in a different sense. 2 days ago I gave a seminar here yesterday, just to highlight new concepts and new this thing. And in fact, Vinny Joshi is not here today, right now. So he is now involved with me as a CBSE advisor for IT enabling the schools. There's a huge amount of work to do. I will do it to the extent I can physically, but it requires a network. But today I am trying to meet some faculty, some of your batch, to create a kind of enterprise to solve this IT infrastructure management problem. Thanks to the huge ERNet experience, I have a huge experience. I mean, basically, let me put, IIT Kanpur was the first truly networked campus LAN that was made in India. And remember, when we got internet, I have a lot of stories to tell. I'll just share one story. Our internet link could never work here because the modem will not be able to dial up because the line resistance. The nearest telephone exchange was 12 kilometers away, and they were running with poor line drivers. And I tried, somehow modem should work. So I told, let us take the email machine, put it in the telephone exchange. They were all very good friends. Put it in the telephone exchange. Bhatnagar used to go and collect the floppies email by floppies and then come by scooter and reload it here so that we will get email. That is the way we started building. And then, that was going on, and thanks to R&D was dean for some time at that time. Then another interesting thing happened. I asked the telephone exchange, why don't you measure cable resistance of all incoming cables to IIT Kanpur on the telephone? And then we found that some 4 or 5 pairs were in good health. The rest were all in damage. I said, pull 2 of them out, put them in parallel, resistance will decrease, capacitance will load, but at least some bits will go right. So why not we do that? So he did it, and in fact I pulled out DNR and this cable and some another office cable. So, and then made it into the first modem, and it did work, although at a lower bit rate as I expected. But that is how the email link was stabilized here initially. And then of course a lot of things were done, and we had to do very interesting things with telephone exchange. to come to Kalyanpur so that we will get fiber optic. When we managed to get the telephone exchange allocated. Then there was another problem. I said the fiber optic should come to our computer center. They said no, we won't give it for customer premises. That was Delhi code. Then I said you put it in Nankari but just take it through the computer center. That is how we got our fiber optic connectivity. Thanks.
Interesting story there. With that, I think we'll conclude this session. Again, thanks to all the professors who visited from their homes and spent the 2-3 days with us. It was great interacting with them.
We should also thank Mrs. Sama, those who traveled, Mrs. Vishwas and Mrs. Srivatsan, who came. It is not easy traveling in the winter, and they made, they took the time, Mr. Pandya, to come, and so we're really grateful that you participated, you shared your memories.
Thank you. Please join us at the
You're gonna miss me. Continue. Oh God, don't. Miss me by my head. You're gonna miss me everywhere. Oh, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. If that ever happens on stage, continue. I'm gonna take it for the long way round. Oh, I'm the prettiest of you. It's got mountains, it's got rivers, it's got sights to give you shivers. Oh, sure would be.
There are more results today. That's because of the ODIs and logistics. Once you are used to hitting certain balls consistently, you are an intense tool for that, and you don't realize there are going to slips now.
I'm not good at tennis.
Check. This first song is Ahate. कुछ ना सही कुछ ना सही हो रही दिल के दर पे मेरे तू यही है कहीं कभी मेरे ख्वाब सा कभी उलझे जवाब सा कि सहरा में भी आग सा मेरे जैसा दर पे मेरे तू यही है कहीं ना she's wondering what clothes to wear. She put on and brushes her long blonde hair. And then she asks me, do I look alright? And I say yes, you look wonderful tonight. Go to a party and everyone turns to see this beautiful lady is walking around with me. And then she asks me, do you feel alright? And I say yes, I feel wonderful tonight. I feel wonderful 'cause I've seen the love in your eyes. And the wonder of it all is that you just don't realize how much I love you. It's time to go home now, and I've got an aching head. So I'll give her the car keys, she'll help me to bed. And then I tell her, as I turn off the lights, I say, my darling, you are wonderful tonight. Oh, my darling, you are wonderful tonight.
को बेजान बेजान दिल को तेरे इश्क ने जिंदा किया, फिर तेरे इश्क ने ही इस दिल को तबाह किया। तड़प तड़प के इस दिल से आह निकलती रही, मुझको सजा दी प्यार की। ऐसा क्या गुनाह किया कि लुट गए, हाँ लुट गए, कि लुट गए हम तेरी मोहब्बत में। तड़प तड़प के इस दिल से आह निकलती रही, मुझको सजा दी प्यार की। ऐसा क्या गुनाह किया कि लुट गए, हाँ लुट गए, कि लुट गए हम तेरी मोहब्बत में। अजब है इश्क यारा, भैया खट बता मचल मचल के इस दिल से आह निकलती मुझको सजा दी प्यार की ऐसा क्या गुनाह किया कि लुट गए हाँ लुट गए ये लुट गए हम तेरी मोहब्बत में तड़प तड़प के इस दिल से आह निकलती मुझको सजा दी प्यार की ऐसा क्या गुनाह किया कि लुट गए हाँ लुट गए कि लुट गए हम तेरी मोहब्बत में सागा बदनी रा धागा रे मागा नीरे दादा सा पनी दा मादा पमारे